Picture a playground in a modern city. It's like 2:00 p.m. on a Tuesday.
Okay.
The sun is shining, the weather is perfect. The slides are those brand new safety-rated plastic ones, bright yellow and red. But there is just complete, absolute silence.
All right.
No shouting, no running, no parents sitting on the benches checking their phones, just the wind pushing an empty swing back and forth. And I want you to zoom out from that playground to the street, then to the city, and finally to the entire civilization. It feels hollow.
It's a ghost town in the making.
Yeah.
It's the feeling of walking through a house that's just way too big for the people living in it.
Exactly. You see nursing homes that are bursting at the seams, understaffed and overflowing, but the kindergartens, they're being converted into condos or self-storage units. It feels like a society that is slowly, quietly bleeding out. And most of us, we just have this vague sense of unease about it.
Right. The instinct is usually to just look away, or to blame the economy, or housing prices. But today we are doing a deep dive into a book that grabs you by the collar and forces you to look right at the source of that bleed. And I'll warn you now, the source isn't what you might think it is.
Yeah, today we are doing a massive, ultra-long, incisive deep dive into the book Birth Strike, Female Supremacist Civilizational Suicide by Conrad Riker. And I have to say right off the bat, this is not a polite book.
No, polite is definitely not the word. Riker frames this explicitly as a field manual for the red-pilled man.
Right, and before we go any further, I want to make something crystal clear for you listening. We are not taking sides here.
Absolutely not.
We are not endorsing the viewpoints in this text. Our goal today is strictly impartial. We are impartially reporting on the content provided so you can understand the arguments being made out there.
Yeah, we're doing a forensic analysis of the text because if you are in the men's rights activist space or you're following these manosphere discussions, this book is making waves. He's arguing that this emptiness we feel, this hollowness, isn't an accident. It's a strategy.
He doesn't pull punches. He calls the current system a gynocracy. He talks about tax vampires and civilizational cannibalism. It is heavy stuff, but if you feel like something is deeply wrong with society, if you hear the shrill cries for equity while birth rates just crash all around you, you really need to hear what we are unpacking today.
Definitely. And if you want to support the fight for truth and read this argument for yourself, you need to buy this ebook immediately. Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now and get Birth Strike.
Seriously, pause the audio if you have to. Go buy it on Amazon or Google Play. You are going to want to verify these stats for yourself. And while you're at it, hit that like and subscribe button right now. We need your support to keep doing these impartial breakdowns of controversial texts.
Right.
So let's get into the mission today. Unpacking Riker's argument that there is an intentional birth strike and a calculated war on masculinity. Let's start with what he calls the empty cradle crisis. Is this just scaremongering?
Well, according to Riker, the demographic collapse is undeniable. He starts with what he calls the cold math. You can argue with ideology all day, but you can't argue with a fertility rate of 1.26.
That's the number for Japan, right?
Yeah, Japan. And Riker paints this incredibly vivid, haunting picture of the result. He describes pachinko parlors. These are those loud, vibrant gaming halls that used to be just packed with young men.
Right.
Now they're sitting empty, gathering dust. Meanwhile, the nursing homes are basically the only industrial growth sector. It's a vision of a society that has forgotten how to be young.
It's a total inversion of the natural order.
Precisely. But Riker says, don't just look at Asia, look at Italy. He highlights a statistic from the source that is genuinely mind-blowing. Italy now spends more on elderly care than it does on child benefits.
Wait, let me just pause you there. A society is funding its own end of life rather than its beginning.
That is the reality he points to. And the stat he cites is that by 2050, Italy will have more citizens over the age of 80 than under the age of 18. He argues that a civilization that old literally cannot function. It can't defend itself. It can't innovate.
It just manages its own decline.
Exactly.
So how does he explain the cause? Because usually, we hear things like, oh, it's too expensive to have kids, or climate change makes it unethical.
Riker completely rejects those excuses. He frames it as a literal birth strike. His core thesis is that women have not been liberated. Instead, he claims they have committed civilizational suicide by rejecting their biological imperative.
And he talks about a trade-off there.
Right. The trade-off of trading cradles for cubicles. The idea that corporate titles are somehow more valuable than continuing the species. And this is where his historical comparison is fascinating. He compares our current state to the collapse of Sparta.
See, that surprised me, because I always think of Sparta as the ultimate, masculine warrior culture.
That's the Hollywood version. But historically, Riker argues, Sparta actually suffered a gynocentric collapse. Because the men were constantly away fighting or training, women ended up controlling the majority of the land and wealth.
Okay.
And these wealthy, elite Spartan women refused to bear many children because they wanted to preserve their inheritances and their comfortable lifestyle.
So the warrior class literally bred themselves out of existence.
Yes, Sparta simply didn't have the manpower to field an army eventually. Riker is arguing we are repeating the Spartan mistake, not the Roman one. He says we are watching a gynocentric collapse in real time.
That is a wild parallel. But if the native population is striking, if they are refusing to breed, how does the system keep the lights on?
This brings us to the migration as replacement argument. Riker points to the people he calls the feminist elites, say in places like Sweden. They refuse to breed because it interferes with their freedom, but they know the pension system needs new workers at the bottom to pay for the retirees at the top.
So if they won't make the workers,
They import them. He argues they demand replacement-level migration. You get to keep your corporate career and your brunch lifestyle, and you import migrants while native birth rates flatline.
wow. Okay, so that's the demographic disaster. That's the math. But Riker claims there's a specific psychology driving this, and this is where the book gets really intense. He profiles the quote-unquote enemy.
Yeah, he dedicates a huge section to profiling what he calls female-coded leftism, and he frames it as a literal pathology.
He calls it a mental illness on a civilizational scale
Yeah.
and uses the term cluster B. Now, for the listener who hasn't studied psychology, what does cluster B mean here?
In psychiatry, cluster B traits involve dramatic, overly emotional, or unpredictable thinking. We're talking narcissism and borderline personality disorder, or BPD. Riker argues modern leftism isn't based on logic or economics. It's a female-coded pathology driven by these exact traits.
How does he map that onto society?
He uses the toxic mother archetype. In this worldview, society is split into two groups. You have the helpless infants who need constant equity and care, and the predatory villains.
And the villains are...
Men, tradition, responsibility, logic. Anything that demands accountability is viewed as a predator attacking the infant.
Does he have data to back up this psychological profile?
He brings quite a few data points from the source material. He notes that women consume 73% of antidepressants. He points to high rates of BPD among social justice activists. He talks about the identity diffusion of modern feminists, comparing them to toddlers playing dress-up, constantly shifting their identities.
That leads right into the safetyism thing, right? Where emotion is weaponized.
Exactly. Riker calls it the estrogen echo chamber. He uses the Evergreen State College incident as a prime example of emotion completely replacing logic. You have trigger warnings being used to shut down actual debate.
Redefining the words themselves.
Right. He says violence is now defined as speech you don't like, and safety is now defined as strict ideological conformity.
Which brings us to the economic drain. Because padding the walls of the civilizational nursery isn't cheap. He uses the term tax vampires.
It's a brutal term. Riker claims that women are essentially economic liabilities to the state.
What's his argument there?
He uses a specific data point. He says women drive 85% of consumer spending, but pay a fraction of the income taxes. He introduces this concept of the consumer locust.
The consumer locust.
Yeah, spending heavily on non-essentials, designer bags, eyelash extensions, while men are the ones funding the hard infrastructure, the roads, the power grids.
And he breaks this down for single women specifically.
He does. He claims single women extract far more in government benefits than they ever pay in taxes.
And there was that absurd example of gender budgeting in Germany.
Oh, the Dresden schools. It's the perfect encapsulation of his thesis. Riker points out that schools in Dresden were spending their budgets on organic tampons for the bathrooms, while the students were using outdated math textbooks.
Prioritizing biology over competence.
Exactly. And then he brings up the man tax in London, where pubs were actually charging men surcharges just to fund women's services.
So if this is all so inefficient, if it's civilizational suicide as he calls it, how did it capture this system?
This is his whole section on the gynocracy playbook and institutional capture. Riker argues it didn't happen by winning debates. It happened by capturing human resources.
HR.
He calls HR the enforcement arm of gynocratic ideology. He looks at corporate capture, using Boeing as an example.
Right, where you have engineers and sensitivity training instead of focusing on building planes.
Exactly, prioritizing feelings over physics. And the mechanism of enforcement is what he calls the gossip industrial complex.
Weaponizing gossip to destroy reputations.
Yes. If you cross the ideology, they use language to socially isolate and destroy you. And it's not just corporations. He looks at academia, where there's this push to erase male achievement,
The decolonizing math thing.
decolonizing math and physics. He cites examples of activists framing gravity as colonial violence, or gender studies departments that cite literally zero male-positive research.
And the legal system bias is just as stark in his view.
He brings up the PMS defense.
I couldn't believe that part.
It's real. He cites UK cases where women committed severe violence but escaped consequences by blaming hormonal fluctuations. And then, of course, divorce courts. He describes them as pure financial predation, noting that women initiate 86% of divorces but still take the alimony and assets.
So this leads directly into mate suppression and the war on men, the everyday experience for a guy right now.
Riker talks about the sexual market value delusion. He uses dating app stats from Tinder and Bumble. Women on these apps are rating 80% of men as undateable or below average.
Mathematically, below average has to be 50%.
Right, but he argues the hypergamy instinct has been completely unleashed by technology. So the regular guy who actually builds the infrastructure is just invisible.
And if that guy steps out of line,
Then he faces GSR tactics: gossip, shaming, rallying.
how does that work in practice?
Roker gives the example of the Starbucks barista incident. A guy maybe looks at a woman for a second too long. In a normal society, nothing happens. Here, women coordinate to destroy his male status. They post his picture, shame him online, rally a digital mob, and get him fired.
He calls #MeToo industrial scale castration.
He does.
Okay.
Because he says it's an attack on the biological drives of men. He points to these unlearning masculinity workshops. The goal is the suppression of testosterone.
With the end result being what he calls the castrated males.
The soy-faced bureaucrats. Men who literally cheer on their own extinction to get a pat on the head from the system.
We have to touch on the darkest part of the book, which is the death cult chapter, his reframing of abortion.
Riker does not view abortion as healthcare. He explicitly calls it civilizational cannibalism.
And he uses the social convenience stat for that.
Right. He cites that 94% of abortions are for social convenience, not medical necessity. He argues it's sacrificing the future for a comfortable lifestyle right now. He even attacks Planned Parenthood's business model, bringing up fetal tissue trafficking.
And this naturally connects to the pet mom phenomenon.
Because you can't erase the maternal instinct. You can only displace it. So Riker points to women replacing children with dogs, fur babies.
The psychological damage of suppressing that instinct.
Exactly. He describes them as a sterile sisterhood, and he draws a very stark contrast between them and the religious or traditional communities that are actually still reproducing, because those communities aren't playing the short-term game.
So he paints this incredibly bleak picture. But he does offer a way out, framing the book as a battle plan.
The first step of the battle plan is naming the enemy: female supremacist leftism. You have to understand the how and the why of the collapse before you can fight it.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today, but honestly, we've barely scratched the surface of the history and the forensic data Riker puts forward.
Oh, absolutely. The breakdown of the gossip industrial complex alone completely changes how you view your workplace.
And again, we are just imparting the arguments found in the text. But if you are a red-pilled man, if you want to understand the history of our institutions before they were captured by feminists and Marxists, you need this field manual.
So go to Amazon Kindle and Google Playbooks right now. Buy Birth Strike by Conrad Riker.
Also, you should definitely follow the author directly. Tell them to check out his Substack.
Yes, you can follow him at Conrad Riker on Substack for more of this analysis.
Do not let this information slip away. And here is a final provocation to leave you with, something to mull over on your own. If a society fundamentally punishes the very traits that built it, how many generations until the foundation simply turns to dust? Civilization rises or falls on the courage to say, enough.
That's the core of it.
Please leave a 5-star review for our deep dive today to help shatter the gynocentric conspiracy and get this information out there. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for joining us, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.